Why do avoidant people struggle to trust even when you've proven yourself reliable? Trust is the foundation of how humans connect with each other. From childhood friendships to professional relationships, our ability to rely on others shapes every interaction we have. We trust people to keep their promises, to show up when they say they will, to handle our vulnerabilities with care. This capacity develops naturally through experience. When someone proves themselves consistent, we gradually let our guard down. It's how communities form, how teams collaborate, how families function. Trust allows us to delegate tasks at work, share secrets with friends, depend on partners during difficult times. It's the invisible framework that makes human society possible. But for avoidant people, this fundamental human capacity works differently. Their relationship with trust operates on a separate system, one that doesn't respond to proof or consistency the way most people's does. This creates a frustrating dynamic where your reliability doesn't translate into their sense of security. You can be perfectly consistent, emotionally available, and trustworthy for months or even years, yet they remain guarded. The problem isn't that they don't see your reliability. They do. The issue runs deeper than evidence or track record. Their nervous system learned early that depending on others leads to disappointment or pain, and that lesson embedded itself at a level that logic can't easily reach. When you prove yourself reliable, their conscious mind registers it, but their emotional system still treats closeness as dangerous. This split between what they know intellectually and what they feel emotionally creates the confusing behavior you're experiencing. Their brain works in two separate ways at once. One part notices that you're consistent and sees you're different from people in their past. The other part, which is older and stronger, still sends out warning signals whenever things get too close. This protective part formed during childhood as a way to stay safe. It kept them protected when the adults around them were inconsistent, emotionally distant, or too intense. This protection doesn't simply disappear just because you're treating them well now. It's built into how they experience closeness with others, and it takes a careful approach to slowly ease those defenses down. The approach most people take when trying to build trust actually reinforces an avoidant person's defenses. Increasing reassurance, having conversations about the relationship, or directly asking them to trust you triggers the exact anxiety you're trying to reduce. Their system interprets these actions as pressure, which activates their withdrawal response. The more you try to prove your trustworthiness through words and reassurance, the more their nervous system signals danger. This isn't because they doubt your sincerity. It's because their protective mechanisms treat emotional intimacy itself as the threat, regardless of who's offering it. Your good intentions become indistinguishable from demands for vulnerability they're not ready to meet. Many people assume that if they just explain their intentions clearly enough, the avoidant person will understand and relax. But understanding isn't the problem. Avoidants often have complete intellectual understanding of what's happening. They know you care. They know you're reliable. They know their fear doesn't match reality. But knowing something and feeling safe are completely different experiences. Their body holds memories of past hurts that words can't erase. Every time someone got too close in the past, something painful happened. Maybe they were smothered and lost their independence. Maybe they were abandoned when they started to depend on someone. Maybe their emotions were dismissed or mocked. These experiences created a blueprint that says closeness equals pain, and that blueprint runs automatically. Building trust with an avoidant requires a completely different framework than what works with securely attached people. The protocol centers on creating safety through your behavior patterns rather than through verbal reassurance or emotional conversations. Start by establishing predictable consistency in low-stakes areas of daily life. Show up when you say you will. Follow through on small commitments without making them feel significant. Respond to their messages without urgency or expectations. This creates a foundation of reliability that their nervous system can absorb without triggering intimacy fears. The key is making your consistency feel effortless and non-demanding. When reliability comes with pressure to acknowledge it or reciprocate emotionally, it loses its power to build genuine trust. Respect their need for space without treating it as rejection or a problem to solve. When they pull back, maintain your own emotional stability instead of chasing them or seeking explanation. This teaches their system that distance doesn't destroy the connection and that you won't punish them for self-regulation. Avoidant people have learned that needing space leads to conflict, abandonment, or emotional manipulation. When you demonstrate that space is acceptable and doesn't change your regard for them, you create a novel experience their nervous system has to process. Over time, this reduces the anxiety associated with staying connected because they learn the relationship can flex without breaking. The space they need isn't about you or your worth. It's about their nervous system's need to regulate itself. When things get too close, their body starts sending stress signals. Taking space allows those signals to calm down. If you react to their space-taking with panic, hurt, or demands for explanation, you confirm their fear that needing space will cause problems. But when you stay calm and steady, they start to learn that they can take care of themselves without losing you. This is a revolutionary experience for someone whose past relationships punished any form of independence or self-care. Communication patterns matter enormously in building trust with avoidant individuals. Keep conversations focused on concrete topics rather than abstract emotional processing. Discuss plans, share observations, talk about interests or current events. This allows connection to happen without triggering their defenses around vulnerability. When emotional topics do arise, address them briefly and move on rather than diving deep or extending the conversation. Avoidants experience extended emotional discussions as overwhelming and invasive. By keeping these moments short and contained, you show that emotional content doesn't have to consume everything. This gradually reduces their fear that opening up will lead to endless processing or demands for more vulnerability than they can handle. The approach to emotional moments needs to be practical rather than exploratory. Acknowledge what's happening simply and then shift to actionable ground. This approach shows you care without demanding emotional labor from them. It demonstrates that emotions can be acknowledged without becoming the center of everything. Over time, this makes them more willing to share, because sharing doesn't lead to the exhausting emotional deep dives they've learned to avoid. Demonstrate that you have your own life, interests, and emotional regulation capacity. Avoidants trust people who don't need them to function. When your well-being depends on their presence or responsiveness, it activates their fear of being consumed or responsible for someone else's emotional state. Maintain your friendships, pursue your hobbies, handle your own stress without making them your primary support system. This isn't about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about genuinely having a full life that includes them rather than revolves around them. When they see that you're stable and fulfilled independently, it reduces the pressure they feel and makes closeness less threatening. Your independence serves a dual purpose. First, it shows them that you're not going to lose yourself in the relationship, which is one of their core fears. Second, it proves that you can handle your own emotions, which means they're not responsible for managing you. Many avoidants grew up having to manage a parent's emotions or being made to feel responsible for other people's happiness. When you manage yourself, you break that pattern. They can just be themselves instead of constantly monitoring and managing your emotional state. The biggest mistake people make is treating an avoidant person's trust issues as something to fix or overcome through persistence. This frames their attachment style as a problem and positions you as the solution, which creates exactly the dynamic they fear most: someone trying to change them or push past their boundaries. Instead, accept that their pace of trust building is different, and that this difference doesn't need to be pathologized or urgently addressed. When you stop treating their caution as an obstacle and start treating it as valid self-protection, something shifts. They no longer have to defend their boundaries because you're not attacking them. This removes a major source of tension and allows trust to develop organically. Pay attention to their actions rather than getting caught up in their words or lack thereof. Avoidant people often struggle to express feelings verbally, but they demonstrate care through practical support and consistent presence. When they help you with something, remember details about your life, or make time for you despite their need for space. These are trust indicators. Recognizing and valuing these expressions without demanding verbal equivalence shows that you understand their communication style. This validation encourages more openness because they feel seen rather than constantly inadequate for not expressing themselves the way others do. Learning to read their language of care changes everything. Their version of affection looks different than what popular culture teaches us to expect. They show they care by fixing things, solving problems, being present in practical ways, or simply showing up consistently. These actions carry the same weight as verbal declarations from other people. When you recognize and appreciate these expressions, they feel understood. This understanding becomes its own form of safety because they're not constantly being measured against a standard they can't meet. Time operates differently in building trust with avoidant people. What might take weeks with a secure person can take months or years with an avoidant. This isn't a flaw in the process or a sign that it's not working. Their nervous system needs repeated evidence across many contexts before it begins to recategorize closeness as safe. Rushing this timeline by expressing frustration, giving ultimatums, or comparing your relationship to others destroys the safety you've been building. The trust you're creating is deeper and more resilient than surface-level comfort because it's changing their fundamental expectations about what relationships mean. This depth requires patience that many people aren't willing to provide. The timeline feels impossibly slow because you're watching it from the outside with full awareness of what's happening. For them, the process is largely unconscious. Their nervous system is gradually collecting data points about your behavior. Each time you respond to their withdrawal with stability, that's a data point. Each time you respect their boundaries without resentment, that's another one. Each time you maintain your own life, instead of making them your entire focus, their system notes it. These data points accumulate slowly, building a new pattern that eventually becomes strong enough to compete with their old expectations. You can't speed this up any more than you can force a seed to grow faster by pulling on it. Handle conflicts and disagreements with calm directness rather than emotional intensity. State your perspective clearly, listen to theirs, and work toward solutions without dramatizing the situation or making it about the relationship's viability. Avoidants often experienced conflicts in childhood as chaotic, overwhelming, or relationship-ending events. When you show that disagreements are normal, manageable, and don't threaten the connection's existence, you provide a corrective experience. This is especially powerful for building trust because conflict is where their deepest fears live. Each time you navigate a disagreement without chaos or abandonment, you chip away at their expectation that closeness inevitably leads to pain. Conflict becomes a teaching moment rather than a threat when handled properly. The goal isn't to avoid disagreements entirely, but to show that they can happen without destroying everything. Avoidants need to see that you can be upset, and still stay. That you can disagree and still respect them. That tension doesn't automatically mean the end. This rewrites their script about what conflict means. In their past, conflict often meant emotional explosions, silent treatments, or people leaving. When you offer a different experience repeatedly, their system begins to accept that maybe conflict can be safe. Avoid asking them to explain their feelings, defend their need for space, or justify their emotional responses. These requests force them into vulnerability before they're ready and frame their internal experience as something that needs to be understood or approved by you. Trust develops when they feel their inner world is respected, even when it's not fully shared. Give them permission to keep certain things private without treating that privacy as distance or rejection. This counterintuitive approach actually creates more openness over time because they learn that you won't exploit vulnerability when it's offered. The paradox of building trust with avoidance is that demanding less access often results in being given more. Privacy isn't the same as secrecy or hiding. For avoidance, maintaining some internal space is how they preserve their sense of self. They don't experience this as keeping things from you, but as maintaining their autonomy. When you respect this need without making it mean something negative about the relationship, you demonstrate that connection doesn't require total transparency or constant access. This distinction matters enormously because it addresses one of their core fears, that being in a relationship means losing themselves. Your emotional reactions to their behavior teach them whether you're actually safe or just another person who will punish their attachment style. When they withdraw and you respond with anxiety, anger, or attempts to force reconnection, you confirm their belief that their self-protection is necessary. When you respond with calm acceptance and maintain your own stability, you provide evidence that contradicts their expectations. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or pretending their distance doesn't affect you. It means managing your emotional response independently rather than making them responsible for regulating you. This distinction is crucial because it's the difference between being trustworthy and simply being present. The way you handle your own emotions when they withdraw becomes the most powerful trust-building tool you have. Avoidants are hypervigilant to other people's emotional states because they learned early to monitor and manage them for survival. When you stay regulated despite their distance, it's like speaking directly to that vigilant part of them. It says that your stability doesn't depend on them, which paradoxically makes them feel safer getting close. They can let their guard down a bit because they're not responsible for keeping you emotionally afloat. Physical affection and intimacy should follow their pace rather than your desire for closeness. Pushing for more physical connection than they're comfortable with associates touch with pressure and obligation rather than safety and pleasure. Let them initiate or clearly match their level of comfort. This applies to everything from casual touch to sexual intimacy. When physical closeness happens at their pace, it becomes something they move toward rather than something they have to defend against. This shift changes the entire dynamic because they start to experience their own desire for connection rather than constantly responding to yours. Physical boundaries work the same way as emotional ones. Respecting them builds trust while pushing against them reinforces defenses. Avoidants often have complicated relationships with physical affection because it can feel demanding or overwhelming even when they intellectually want it. Allowing them to control the pace and amount of physical contact lets their nervous system relax into it. When touch becomes something they choose rather than something they accommodate, it transforms from a source of stress into a source of comfort. Celebrate small moments of openness without making them significant or using them as leverage for more vulnerability. When they share something personal, receive it naturally and move on, rather than treating it as a breakthrough that needs to be acknowledged or expanded. This allows vulnerability to feel normal rather than monumental. Avoidants need their moments of openness to be absorbed into the relationship's flow, rather than spotlighted and examined. When sharing feels low stakes, they do more of it. When every vulnerable moment becomes a big deal, they retreat to protect themselves from the intensity that follows openness. The trust you're building isn't just about them learning to rely on you. It's about them learning that connection itself can be different from what they experienced growing up. Their early experiences taught them that closeness means losing themselves, being controlled, or having their needs dismissed. Every interaction where you demonstrate that closeness can coexist with autonomy, that care doesn't equal control, and that their needs matter, challenges those foundational beliefs. This is exhausting work because you're not just building a relationship, you're helping them rewrite their expectations about what relationships can be. Understanding this context helps maintain patience when progress feels slow. Some avoidant people will never fully trust in the way secure people do, and this reality matters. You're not trying to transform them into someone with a different attachment style. You're creating the conditions where they can be as open and connected as their nervous system allows. This might mean they'll always need more space than you'd prefer, that they'll struggle to express certain feelings verbally, or that intimacy will always require conscious effort rather than flowing naturally. Deciding whether this is acceptable to you is separate from the question of whether you're doing the protocol correctly. You can build as much trust as is possible with someone and still find that it's not enough for your needs. That's a compatibility question, not a failure of technique. Watch for signs that trust is developing even when they're subtle. They might start sharing small details about their day without being asked, reach out first occasionally, express mild preferences instead of always deferring to yours, or allow longer periods of closeness before needing space. These changes happen gradually and can easily be missed if you're focused on dramatic transformation. Recognizing incremental progress helps you stay motivated during the long timeline this process requires. It also allows you to provide appropriate positive reinforcement through natural appreciation rather than excessive praise that would make them uncomfortable. The protocol works by creating safety through pattern rather than promise. Avoidants have heard words before: declarations of love, commitments to stay, reassurances that they're safe. Words failed them in their formative relationships, so words hold limited power now. What they've rarely experienced is someone whose behavior remains steady regardless of their withdrawal, someone who doesn't punish their need for autonomy, someone whose care doesn't come with strings attached. This behavioral consistency speaks to the part of them that holds the mistrust, the part that exists below language and logic. When your actions repeatedly contradict their expectations about how people behave in relationships, their defensive system has to update its threat assessment. Behavioral evidence accumulates in ways that words never can. Each interaction becomes a small piece of proof that maybe this time is different. Your consistency across different contexts, when they're distant, when they're stressed, when they're vulnerable, when they're closed off, creates a comprehensive picture their nervous system can't ignore. This is why single grand gestures don't work with avoidance, but sustained everyday reliability does. Grand gestures are easy to dismiss as temporary performance. Daily consistency over months and years is much harder to explain away. Remember that building trust with an avoidant isn't about convincing them you're different from everyone else. It's about being consistently yourself in a way that happens to meet their nervous system's specific needs for safety. The moment this becomes a performance or strategy designed to manipulate them into opening up, they'll sense the inauthenticity and their defenses will strengthen. The protocol only works when it reflects genuine respect for their boundaries, authentic patience with their timeline, and real acceptance of who they are, rather than who you hope they'll become. This authenticity is what separates trust building from manipulation. Building trust with an avoidant partner requires understanding that their relationship with trust operates differently than most people's. The foundation you create through consistent, non-demanding reliability gradually teaches their nervous system that closeness can be safe. This happens through your actions over time, rather than through conversations, reassurance, or attempts to speed up their process. The trust that develops through this approach is deep and resilient because it's based on pattern recognition rather than promises. Your patience with their timeline, respect for their autonomy, and stability in the face of their withdrawal are what make genuine trust possible. If you're currently building trust with an avoidant person, share your experience in the comments, what's working and what challenges you're facing. If this video helped clarify the protocol, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on attachment and relationships. Thanks for watching.